This is the Plagmanrules Podcast. Welcome back to another edition. It's Friday, it's July 28th, and we've got a couple of really interesting topics to talk about today. The first thing we're going to cover is this new trailer from It. Then the second topic we're going to get into is everything that's happening now with some of these reshoots for Justice League. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the news that came out this week about the 25th James Bond film. Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about the It trailer, and of course we're talking about It being the Stephen King adaptation based on the novel. So the first trailer came out back in March and broke all sorts of records. Everybody went online to see it and everything, and a lot of people just absolutely loved it, and I was one of them. I thought that first trailer was really what got me on board, because I was interested in the project beforehand, but I wasn't exactly going to say, oh yeah, that's going to be one of my absolute must-sees. Now it's turned into one of those, just based on that first trailer. Now we get the second trailer, kind of the second full trailer. Is it trailer number 2 or number 3? I goddamn hate it when these websites, like the official channels from Warner Brothers, say first trailer, like first official trailer, when it's like, no, you had a teaser trailer out a couple months ago. This new trailer from It gets not too far into the plot details and is giving you more of the idea of this is what we're going up against. Pennywise the clown, a little bit of an intro into the kids, a little bit. I mean, not enough to where we can just name them right off the top of our heads or anything. But what I really like about this is the atmospherics of it, kind of the sense of this small town with a secret kind of idea. And of course, we got to talk about it. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise the clown. Now, at first, he was not cast. It was Will Poulter in the role. And even though I wasn't a huge admirer of his work, I hadn't seen everything of his, I said, just based on his stature and on his looks and everything, I said, that guy can probably play a pretty creepy clown. Then they cast Bill Skarsgård, who I had seen a little bit of his work in Hemlock Grove, the Netflix series. Just from what I saw, I'm like, well, he can probably do good work and other stuff. He looks like he has really pulled off a really menacing clown here. And of course, Pennywise is such a good character. And I'll tell you what, that line in the trailer when he's with Georgie down in the sewer, here, take it. Oh, that was awesome. Now when it comes to movies, horror movies especially, it takes a lot to scare me. In real life, I scare pretty easy. But that kind of unsettled me while I was watching it. I was kind of like, ooh, that's freaky. There's a couple other images here and there and a couple other little moments like that brought me on that level. So that means for me that this, yes, has become an absolute must-see. Because yeah, if the trailer can do that to me to where it kind of sets me on edge a little bit, that's doing something really good. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about that, but we're going to go into probably the topic that will take up the most amount of time here today, the Justice League reshoots. Now, of course, we'd heard back a couple months ago now that Joss Whedon was going to step in to complete Justice League because it was still doing some reshoots, some post-production work and all that because of Zack Snyder's daughter committing suicide. That was really a horrible thing to hear about. And I know right now, I'm going to lay in a little bit of backstory here, something to kind of bring you up to speed with what my feelings are on this, is because it feels like every other day we hear a major news story from either Marvel or DC. Now, I am not somebody who sides one way or another with these because I'm not a blind person. I'm not somebody who blindly follows the norm or the league, that everybody else wants you to follow. I'm not somebody who's going to naysay everything Marvel just because I'm DC. I'm not going to naysay everything DC just because I like the Marvel movies. Now, personally, I tend to enjoy the Marvel movies more. And personally, some of the DC stuff has really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, especially Suicide Squad last year was the worst movie I saw all year. And it wasn't the worst movie because it was DC. It was the worst movie because it was poorly executed. I couldn't get any sense of who or where the characters are, and I really couldn't tell what was happening sometimes. Plus, it has the weakest villain I've seen in a long time. So there was a lot going on there with that. So here's the thing when it comes to news from these two outlets. It's a perfect reflection of the American political spectrum. You're either Republican or you're Democrat. And I'm not going to link up, because it doesn't matter in this comparison here that I'm doing now if DC is this one or that one, or Marvel is this one or that one, and vice versa, whatever. Because the thing is, in real life political spectrum, it seems that when it comes to news stories that comes out, that you have either people who are all pro-Republican stuff that naysay anything that comes out against Trump or against any of the administration stuff or any other Republican stuff. And at the same time, you have people who, even if it's sketchy, will go for it as long as it's against the Republican or against the administration or against Trump personally. At the same time, you have that in the DC versus Marvel thing, where anything that comes out about DC, some people have to feel they have to spin it a negative way, and some people have to spin it a positive way if it's Marvel, and then vice versa for the DC fans, where if anything comes out about Marvel, they have to immediately spin and say, well, this is negative, and there's no positive to it, kind of one of those deals, which I think is absolute crap in both real life political stuff and in this DC stuff. Here's the thing, we live in a world that is not black or white. It's gray. It's very gray, to where one ideal, whether it's DC or Marvel or Republican or Democrat, one side can do something that has both a positive and a negative effect. And I'm sick and tired, both in the political spectrum, personally for me, and in this DC stuff, of people who refuse to see anything good about one side and will never say anything bad about their side. It's ridiculous. It happens in the press with both of these cases. It happens with fans in both these cases, or voters or whatever. I'm sick of it, okay? We don't live in a world of all positives on one side and all negatives on the other side. It's a gray world. Kind of like how they say in the movie Clear and Present Danger, it's not black and white, Jack. It's gray. The world is gray, Jack. I was just watching that last night. Great movie. So, with this Justice League stuff, immediately there's a lot of this spin on here of negativity, which I read from some reports. And that really kind of infuriated me a little bit, because Joss Whedon is a very talented filmmaker. Not to say Justice League was in trouble, but with him coming in to do the post-production stuff, he can kind of fine-tune some stuff. Now, Zack Snyder, personally as a director, I don't really like him. The thing is, the guy has talent, so I'm not saying he should not be directing this movie, but Joss Whedon coming in to fine-tune things up, you could do a hell of a lot worse. So immediately there's all these people that want a negative spin on that right away. Plus, now we've heard that these reshoots and stuff are going way over schedule. Now, immediately the negative spin people say that's because Joss Whedon is screwing with this whole thing and he's making it kind of a Avengers wannabe movie set in the DC universe. And they're leaping to conclusions, I think, on this. I mean, we don't know for sure what's going to happen with this movie until it's released. But right now, it just seems from what I'm hearing, and not what I want to believe, but just from what I'm hearing, that this is a movie that is still on schedule for its November release. It's just that there's a lot of busy actors that are in this movie. Ben Affleck, he's doing lots of other stuff. Gal Gadot is about to become, potentially, since Wonder Woman's now the biggest movie this summer, could become a very high-in-demand actress. And then you got Ezra Miller. He's kind of starting to come up a little bit more. I hear his name getting thrown around a little bit more than it was before. Henry Cavill. This is the big case here, and it's kind of one of the funniest little parts of the story, too. Henry Cavill right now is shooting the 6th Mission Impossible movie. I think he's a really good fit for that, because I thought he did a spectacular job in Man from U.N.C.L.E. But the thing is, his character in Mission Impossible has a mustache. And Paramount is putting their foot down saying, Henry Cavill has to keep this mustache, and it's a real mustache, it's not a fake one. So DC and Warner Brothers have to green screen the mustache out because, oh my goodness, because they're not going to let him shave the mustache off. That was hilarious when I first read that. I kind of was like, are you for real kind of story. At first I thought, yeah, that's what it was. But it was just kind of a funny thing. Now again, that could turn out to be total BS, but it's almost like it's too funny to not be real. So I wanted to mention that. That is hysterical. I can't remember a case like that before. It'd be funny if, when the time the movie comes around and they start doing press, if that comes up. That's probably going to be the first question when they get to Henry Cavill, when he does his stuff. Anyway, so a lot of this stuff is costing the studio like $25 million in reshoot costs and everything, which normally a reshooting movie doesn't tend to cost that much. Maybe a few million here and there. Like a couple of months ago, if you'll remember, Dan Aykroyd came out and said a lot of bullshit stuff about the new Ghostbusters movie, the all-female one, I mean. And he said that the reshoots cost like $30 to $40 million because there were certain scenes that Paul Feig, the director of the new Ghostbusters, did not want to shoot, but everybody else, according to Dan Aykroyd, who has, not been a really relevant figure in film in like 20 years, was saying that there were all sorts of scenes that he and the studio and everybody else on set was telling him, hey, you need to shoot this, but he's like, no, I'm good. So he had to reshoot it later. Reportedly, he said 30 to 40 million, but then Sony came out and said, nah, 3 to 4 million. Yeah, and that's kind of what happens most of the time. And it happens with every Marvel movie, and now more recently, like every Star Wars movie, there have been reshoots that have not been all that expensive. Now, we never heard what the reshoot costs were on Rogue One. That one might have been somewhere in between. That one probably was closer to 10 million or maybe 12 or 15 million. And that's just me estimating, by the way. And then you have, Justice League costing $25 million. But again, a lot of the reports I'm reading are saying that's due to this cast thing because they can't lock down everybody at the same time. And if they can, it's really going to be pretty chaotic. So that's kind of curious how that came about. And then we got the trailer, at Comic-Con. And it looks like Justice League is going to be, at least based off that trailer, a fairly entertaining movie at worst. At best, maybe you can really turn the ship around for DC and they can finally get this cinematic universe going to a level that can be as popular as Marvel is right now and that can be as successful as Marvel is right now. Now, as far as which one's going to be better, screw that talk, because who cares? Maybe, in regards, maybe 10 years down the road, we're saying, wow, DC really turned it around and beat Marvel both critically and financially. That could happen. I'm not down saying that at all. But I just want to, try to put it out there that, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves here and just based off these couple trailers say that Justice League is now going to top everything Marvel. And at the same time, we can't really say that Marvel's going to keep going the way they are, because for all we know, the next one comes out, it's not very good, and it starts to sink a lot of the stuff. We don't know. We just don't know. So with Justice League, I'm still pumped to see it, more than I was before, because Wonder Woman definitely helped. That made him 1 for 4. Justice League has the chance to make that 2 for 5. And again, I'm thinking that Joss Whedon could definitely help that. And another thing, too, it would really help if all of you DC fanboys could just accept if something that's not perfect is happening with your movie, and Marvel fans to stop kicking the DC fans when they're down, okay? We don't need that. We've got enough of that bullshit going on right now in our political spectrum and everything in Washington. Whether you're for that or against that doesn't matter, and I'm not trying to persuade you one way or the other here. But I'm just saying that as far as news today, with every outlet and stuff, it's just not a good place to be in, I think. And this whole idea that, we have to kick them while they're down, or we have to avoid all negativity, or whichever side you're on, just stop that. Just accept a bad fact, accept a good fact, and live in that gray world that really does exist. Again, we don't live in that black and white world anymore. We live in a gray world where everything's mixed together, where the positives and negatives come out all at the same time. The sooner we accept that, the better off we're going to be. All right, that's enough of my preaching on this. Let's talk about James Bond now. Okay, so we've got a lot of big announcements coming out this week about the next James Bond film. It's about damn time, because I love this franchise, and I'm really curious to see how they kind of dig themselves out of the hole they put themselves in Spectre. Spectre as a movie, I still liked it. And for me especially, the Spectre, the first half of that movie, like the first hour or so, is some of the best of the Daniel Craig movies. Absolutely fantastic, and it has a nice lead-in story. But then it hits a brick wall like halfway through the movie, and then it just turns into the most boring movie ever. Except for the train fight with Dave Bautista. That was pretty awesome. So they dig themselves into this hole here now where Daniel Craig then goes out in the media and says, oh, I'd rather slit my wrists than play James Bond again, which he's a sly guy. I didn't absolutely believe him 100% when he said that. I didn't take that to heart. I got what he was going for. He was kind of making a metaphoric kind of thing where he was saying, just right now, I'm so exhausted after making this movie that I don't want to make another one right now. So now he's had some time off. He's doing the Logan Lucky movie that's coming out here in a couple weeks. Really great reviews so far for that. I'm really excited to see that one. So there's been this whole talk here for months now. Is he going to be James Bond again, or are they going to recast? And we got our first sign back on Monday when they said that November 8th of 2019 was going to be the release date for the 5th James Bond film since they've rebooted with Casino Royale, which could potentially be the 5th film with Daniel Craig. Then the next day, the New York Times comes out and says, yep, Craig is back on, according to some sources here, which that has never been absolutely confirmed, but the New York Times, when it comes to movie stuff, they rarely mess up. They rarely mess up in a big enough way to where they're suddenly not trustworthy. So that I believe, and I think, that Craig is back. And I think, they probably just settled some stuff money-wise, and they settled some stuff with scheduling and everything. Now we get a couple of directors that are on the short list. Here's the thing you have to understand here. The short list of directors, when this stuff comes out about movies, this does not mean that these are the 3 or 4 or however many are on there. In this case, it's 3. These are not the only 3 directors who can direct this movie. Sometimes, it comes out to where a short list has 3 directors and one of them gets the job. But there are other times when you have this short list of directors that come out and then somebody else gets it. Like I remember J.J. Abrams was not really on everybody's short list to direct The Force Awakens, but then he turns out to direct it. And there's other examples like that, especially with these bigger movies, to where a short list comes out of directors and somebody else who's not on the short list gets it, or somebody who was not interested before comes back and finally signs on. We saw that with Matt Reeves with the Batman back in spring, where he was on board at one point, then he was off, then he got back on. And I don't really remember a shortlist that included his name for the director. I could be wrong about that, but... So our 3 names, at least according to the initial reports from Deadline here, are Denis Villeneuve, who most recently did Arrival. He also did Sicario and Prisoners. Yann Demange, who did 71, and David Mackenzie, who's fresh off of Hell or High Water. Okay, now let me go through these guys one by one here. Denis Villeneuve is, right now, he's working really hard on getting everything done on Blade Runner 2049, and he's reportedly going to be doing the Dune movie next, which personally I don't give 2 shits about Dune. It doesn't sound like a project I'm interested in. But if that's what he wants to do, because he said that's kind of a passion project of his, if he wants to do it, he can do it. But if he's going to do that right away after Blade Runner, he's probably going to be out of the runnings for this. Then you have Yann Demange, who did 71. I have not seen that one. I haven't seen any of his work, so that could be a chance to actually see him do something. And then you have David Mackenzie, who, yeah, between these 3, I'm kind of almost by default going to have to pick him, because Hell or High Water was a movie that I really liked last year. Wasn't on my top 10 list, but it was damn close. And that's a movie where it opened okay. Like, the opening of the movie was good, but as it kept going, with every, 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, this movie's getting better and better. And especially when we got to the end sequences, especially the big assault on the bank toward the end of the movie that kind of kickstarts the 3rd act, that sequence gets so tense right away that I kind of think about it now. I'm like, man, if that guy can bring that level of tension to a James Bond film and put it in that big action scope that James Bond films have, wow! That could be a perfect choice and a director's heaven kind of situation here. And I haven't seen any of his other work, but I've heard nothing but positive things about a lot of his other movies. So he's going to be my default choice here. I really hope he gets it. But at the same time, we've, been having these kind of innuendos a little bit from Christopher Nolan, to where he's been saying for a long time now, since Skyfall came out pretty much 5 years ago now, that he's been very interested in directing a James Bond film. And I think that, he's obviously a great director and everything. To bring his sensibilities to Bond, again, that's another perfect choice. So he could still rebound and come back and actually get the job. We don't know yet, because he hasn't exactly laid down his plans yet for what he's going to do next. Either he or David Mackenzie would be great choices. Personally, I want to see Tom Hooper direct something, because I just watched The King's Speech again last night. I would like to see Tom Hooper direct that, even though I haven't really liked any of his work since. Les Mis was kind of okay. The Danish Girl was not good. But I would like to see him get one of these bigger projects, because, especially somebody like him, his sensibilities, I think, would really fit well. Less so in the James Bond world. I think more so in the Star Wars world. Him directing a Star Wars movie would get me really pumped. But him directing a James Bond movie, I think, could also really work. There was one other name that really popped up to me that could fit in a James Bond director's thing, and he's kind of been making some news lately, too. Give David Ayer a chance, because this is a guy, Fury. He did that a couple of years ago, the tank movie. Phenomenal movie. And even though, Suicide Squad was a really bad movie last year, I'd say give him a shot. So that was one, kind of came up and I was like, yeah, he'd probably do well in a James Bond film. Just wanted to kind of touch up on that a little bit. All right, guys, well, we've kind of been having some longer episodes lately, so I was just going to stick to those 3 topics today. We've got some news here lately about what's happening with the Toronto Film Festival and the Venice Film Festival. We got some news on what films are going to be entered into those festivals, which ones are going to be at both or only one, And of course, Telluride is another big festival that comes up toward the end of August, beginning of September. That one, they don't release the film list until the day of. So that one, we're not going to know yet, of course. But especially when we get into the later stuff here, I love to get into Oscar discussions. A lot of you who are subscribed to my channel, that's what you watch me for. So that time's coming, guys. And I think actually next Monday, we'll take a look at the box office and then we'll probably get into the lineup there. I wanted to talk about it today, but then so much stuff came out about Justice League and all the stuff with James Bond. So I wanted to mention those, of course. And I thought those, since they've been more recent, would be a priority. And we'll get to the lineups for the film festivals here on Monday. So yeah, we're going to save the discussions for what's coming up in those festivals, what could really come out strong from those festivals and get the early awards contention. Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. All right, so we'll close off here today with kind of some housekeeping things here. First of all, if you have any ideas or discussion points you want brought up on the podcast, you can leave a comment here on YouTube. You can kind of leave, you like this, you don't like this, or if you have a suggestion of a topic you'd like me to discuss or something like you want me to review or anything like that, go ahead and leave a comment here on YouTube. Otherwise, I also have a Gmail account set up. That's plagmanrulespodcast@gmail.com, PLAGMANRULES podcast@gmail.com. You can leave a message there whether you like the show or don't like the show as well, or leave a discussion point, again, in the comments or at that Gmail address. All right, guys, so we'll be back on Monday. Again, we'll take a look at the box office on Monday, see what happened over the weekend, and we'll talk about what's happening with the film festival circuit coming up. Again, we'll talk about Venice, we'll talk about Toronto, some guesses on maybe what could be a Telluride. We might get into some discussions there, so that's one you don't want to miss. All right, guys, until next time, this has been the Plagman Rules Podcast.